everyone, and welcome to my channel where we talk about all things about books, the books that I love, and the books that I didn't love so much. And today we're going to talk about some books that I didn't love so much. Today I want to talk to you about my most disappointing books of 2024. Over the next couple of weeks, I will be posting a series of basically my yearly wrap-up content as I will go back and reflect on my reading year in 2024 and look ahead to the reading year in 2025. So I want to talk about some of the books that were the most disappointing to me this year. And I want to preface this by saying that disappointing doesn't necessarily mean that I think it was a bad book. There are actually some books on this list that I think were good books, but I was disappointed in them for some reason. A lot of times it could be that I had like really high expectations for a book and it just didn't quite live up to those expectations. But there's a few books that really stand out to me as books that definitely disappointed me. The first book to talk about is one that's probably going to be pretty controversial that it's on this list because I think it is a very beloved book by many. It is also a book that I don't think is that horrible. Oh, hi, sweetie. Hi, this is Baylor. She is demanding dinner at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, so that's really nice of her. The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is a book that I actually think was a very good book. I gave it 4 stars, and I still stand by that 4-star rating. The reason why this book was disappointing for me is because it was so highly rated by so many people. I went into this book thinking it was going to be at least within my top 5 books of the year, if not my number 1 or number 2 book of the year. Everyone I've ever seen review this book just raves about how amazing this book is, and it just ultimately couldn't quite live up to that for me. I have a couple of issues with the book that just meant that it didn't really live up to that hype for me. One, I just didn't love the main character as much as I wanted to. He was very much this main character who was almost just like too perfect. Like, none of the problems he ever got himself into actually ended up being that much of a problem. I don't know that I always loved these characters where it's just like they're just like too strong or too powerful or too smart, and they just kind of have so much cunning that they just kind of connive their way out of every problem that they're ever in. And I liked that to a little bit, but not to an extreme, and I would have loved to have seen his scheming get himself into more problems than it always just getting himself out of problems. I also, while I thought the world in the story was interesting, like, I love a magical school, I love a fish out of water type of story, it just at times definitely felt a little tropey for me, and I felt like I just expected the book to feel a little bit more unique, and I feel like the only super unique part of the book for me was the idea of the labyrinth, and what that was and the role it contributed to the story. That is definitely very unique for me, and I do think that it may be going in a direction where it is going to be more unique. Hi, honey. Hi, sweetie. What are you doing? No, you can't get into the Christmas presents. You can't get into the Christmas presents. We have to love our dogs. And I think it probably is going into that direction where it is going to be something that is more unique and maybe more of a fantasy with sci-fi elements that could be really interesting and really cool going forward, but I just don't think it quite got there for me. But I'm definitely going to continue to read it. I'm certainly interested in where it's going to go from here. As Good as Dead, which is the 3rd book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, was an absolute flop for me. Like, I have a lot of really strong opinions about why I really, really dislike this book. I enjoyed the first 2 books. I really enjoyed the first book. I thought the first book was a ton of fun, just like a really fun YA thriller. I listened to them on audiobook, and I will rave to the end of my days about how good these books are on audio. They are a really unique, really fun, full cast audiobook experience that I highly suggest listening to them if you're going to dive in. But the amount of just stupid ass decisions that these people made at the end of that 3rd book is just mind-boggling. Like, I don't understand how you can take a character who has largely been very smart throughout all of this. Obviously, she is dealing with a lot of trauma by the time the third book comes along, but she is very smart throughout all of this. Just make the absolute dumbest decisions in succession that I've ever seen, and then somehow allow it to all work out for her was so incredibly frustrating for me. And this may be something that might be heavily personal for me, but I was an attorney, I worked in the criminal justice system, and so when I see things that are just like incredibly unrealistic portrayals of that system and of crime and how crime is investigated and how things work, it's just like really irritating to me. And that was so irritating to me that it almost kind of ruins the series for me, and I just really wish that I never read the third book. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Oh my god. This book is like astounding to me that there are so many people out there raving about how much they love this book. And I really do try when I am reading something that is a YA book to temper my expectations into that frame of mind, because I am not the target audience for a YA fantasy romance. I'm just not. I'm a grown adult woman in her 30s, and I go into it with that expectation that it is going to be a YA book, and it is okay if it's a little tropey, and if it reads like a YA book. But this was just bad, and just one of the most unoriginal books I've read in a really long time. And there is a lot of discourse out there about the similarities between this book and Red Queen, and like they deserve the attention that they are getting, because there is a ton of similarities between those two books. And it is one thing to take homage and inspiration from the work that has become before you, that when you read a lot of literature, you will see that there are a lot of things that are sort of repeated tropes and things over time. But this is something that is kind of wild to me, that it has been like this. I also, people like rave about the banter in this book. I could not stand it. Like, no one speaks like that to people. And just the way people eat it up, it's also like kind of long for what it is, and it manages to be so uninteresting. Like, all of the like trial parts of this, and where it's supposed to like be like the Hunger Games, I'm like, I don't know how you managed to make all of that part just like the most uninteresting part of the book. I think the only thing that was ever interesting to me was at first when I thought there was going to be a ballroom scene, which I can eat up in a fantasy romance, and then I realized that there was going to be like 6 in here, and I was like, okay, well, now there's literally no specialness to any of this. I wish I could get the time back that I spent reading this book, to be honest. A Tempest of Tea. I really wanted to like this book. When I heard about it coming out, I was really excited for it. I have not read We Hunt the Flame, but I've heard it's really good, like a very good middle grade fantasy novel. And when I first heard that people were saying, oh, this book is going to be vampires meets Peaky Blinders meets Six of Crows, I was just like, yes, like right up my alley. And the execution on this book and on this story was just so poor. I didn't care about any of the characters. None of the characters were memorable to me. Like, I couldn't tell you a single character from this book's name. I could rack my brain about it, and I could not tell you a single character's name. The villains were not that great. The little like romance going on was not that compelling, and ultimately this book just felt like someone just shoved like every YA fantasy trope as they possibly could into one book, and none of it really made sense, and it just felt like you were bouncing from trope to trope to trope to trope, and it just felt like it really, really, really wanted to be Six of Crows and just did not have any of the heart and emotion that Six of Crows ultimately delivers. Like, Six of Crows packs a punch emotionally, and you care about these characters. I just could not bring me to care about the characters in this book, and it really like pains me to say it, because I had really high expectations that this was going to be something that I would love and ultimately be interested in, but I just couldn't shake it. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I don't read a ton of thriller, which I will admit wholeheartedly, I don't read a ton of thriller. I have heard some decent things about this book, about it being a very good thriller, but I do not think that I was emotionally prepared for what was going to happen in this book. I went into it expecting it to be a kind of twisty thriller type book about a family that had lost a young girl who went missing, and about someone who was abducting young girls. That's what I went into it expecting. That is not what this book delivered. First of all, it was not that twisty. Like, you could figure out very early on what was going on in this book, and the like biggest twist, I just like didn't care about it by that point in time, when you get to like what would be considered the twist at the end. And like, this book, like, trigger warnings from a mile away. This book has some of the like more just like vile, just horrific things that I've ever read about, and I listened to it on audio, and I remember multiple times, I usually listen to audio when I'm driving, where I had to like really turn down the volume because I was like horrified that someone was gonna hear outside my car what I was listening to and just think the worst of me. But there are some scenes in this book that are just absolutely disgusting, and sometimes when I think about how I want to rate a book, I will often think about like, how much does this book stick with you over time, and how much do I think about it. This book has stuck with me, but not in a good way. I think I am like permanently scarred from this book, unfortunately. And this may be a case of it's just not for me. Maybe things that are this dark and this disturbing are not for me, but it kind of weirds me out that it's for anyone, to be quite honest. Footer and Blackbird. This is another one that I had heard really good things about, and I was in the mood for a romance. I went into this knowing, expecting that it was going to be kind of dark, because it's about serial killers, so there was going to be some of that, and that stuff didn't bother me at all about this book. I just found that I didn't care. By the end of it, I was just reading to get through it, because I rarely ever DNF things, and that's a personal problem of mine. I was just trying to finish it. I did not care about these characters. There was nothing particularly that compelling about them. I also think sometimes it can be hard in a romance book if you don't really find the main male character to be attractive. I didn't really find anything that compelling about him. I didn't really find anything that compelling about the female main character. It was just all kind of blah to me. I probably will not continue reading the series. I know it focuses in on a different couple, and the other couple might be compelling, but I just would wonder if maybe some of this is the writing, and just the author may struggle to write something that is more compelling, but it was not compelling for me at all. This last one hurts. The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I am a Leigh Bardugo stan. I think her young adult Grishaverse books are really good examples of young adult books done right. And I also love the Ninth House series. I know that those books can be really polarizing, and I feel like there's a lot of people who don't really like them, and then a lot of people who love them. I adore them. Those books feel like they were written exactly for me. Like, I love that dark academia mixed with fantasy. Those books are perfect to me, and when I found out that she was writing a book about witches, I was ecstatic, because that is also right up my alley. Love witches, books about witchcraft, all of that stuff. Like, give me more of that, like, feed it into my soul. I couldn't tell you how excited I was. And then when I started seeing some of the ARC reviewers, it seemed like a lot of the ARC reviewers that I saw had good things to say about the books, at least what I saw. And a lot of people saying that they absolutely loved it. And so that was my expectation for it. And then after the book released, I started seeing more mixed reviews. And I really tried to not let that cloud my judgment, that some people said that it wasn't that good. But it was very mid. It was just kind of blah at the end of the day. And I don't think it was bad. I think the story was compelling enough. I listened to it on audio. I finished it within a week. It was good enough, but not great. And I do feel like Leigh Bardugo is one of those authors that my expectations are often that I would want something to be great. Also, some of the similarities that have been pointed out of the ending of the Shadow and Bone trilogy and this book are like kind of strange and feel a little bit unoriginal once you figure that out and once you notice it. That I don't love. Like, I wish that there would have been a somewhat more original ending that she hadn't kind of already done before. Would have been great for me. But it was definitely disappointing to get to the end of that and to just find it to be very mid when it was definitely one of my most anticipated reads of the year, and it just wasn't it. So those are the books that were most disappointing for me. And those were a lot of the books that probably got the lowest ratings from me. I am not someone that tends to like hate read books. I don't often pick up a book that I don't think I'm gonna like. The only one that I would say I had some questions about before I picked it up was Powerless. I wasn't entirely sure that it was for me, but I picked it up anyways. But for the most part, I read the books that I want to read. I read books that I'm excited about reading, and so I definitely feel it when they are let you down and when they just don't deliver what you think that they would deliver. So I'd love to know in the comments what were some of your most disappointing books that you read this year. And as always, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you like this video. Thank you.